Welcome to More Perfect After Dark, where we take you behind the scenes to hear what we talk about after our official Sunday night podcast ends. Quite often, these conversations are our most raucous and most revealing chats. We hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, what's the Trump tweet?
Trump tweet, it says, the recent Kansas election,
we forgot all about Congress,
was a really big media event until the Republicans won. Now they play the same game with Georgia. All caps.
God, I forgot about the whole Kansas thing.
I don't even know what that means.
Election,
what's he saying?
He's happy that the Pompeo seat stayed Republican, but now the media's all over John Ossoff in Georgia. And I have to note for our listening audience that I don't actually get to read Trump's tweets firsthand. I have to follow a retweet account called Big League Bunny because Trump blocked me in 2013.
Yes,
because he could not take ribbing from housewives in Maryland. Apparently, he has that thin of skin. And, so I can't even check Trump's tweets. I follow this account called Big League Bunny that just retweets everything from the Trump account and the POTUS account automatically. And it's awesome because I don't have to look at Trump's face. I can look at this picture of a bunny with a pancake on its head, which makes it better.
When you go places and people want to know a fun fact about you, do you use that? Like, I've been blocked by Donald Trump.
I actually do these days. It's one of my badges of honor. Actually, that gets me into liberal VIP rooms all over the country.
Yeah. But did you get a lousy T-shirt for it?
You know what? And it isn't even an original insult that I used. It was when he was in a Twitter feud with Jon Stewart, and Jon Stewart went on his show and called Donald Trump fuckface von clownstick. And so I got in on the Twitter action on that because it was hilarious. Because just say it, fuckface von clownstick. It's hilarious. And he started blocking everyone who was hashtagging fuckface von clownstick. And that included me. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, this guy can't take a joke.
So my sister has a vinyl company. So if I had her print you up a T-shirt, would you wear it?
I would wear it for this podcast.
All right. I will get on that.
Okay.
So there was one other topic that we didn't get to this week that I actually was really looking forward to, which is, everybody knows that Arkansas had a stay of execution on several death sentences that they were going to.
Oh, it was like 7. Yeah, they were going to execute 6 or 7 people in a week.
Was
it 9?
So was that a backlog from a stay? Because we've had a stay here because of inavailability of the cocktail of drugs that they were using, and we had an incident where they tried to execute somebody, and I think it was that they were rushing a botched execution, if you will, and then
a drug was about to expire. Their stock of a particular drug was about to expire, so I think they were pushing up execution dates. I think that's what it was.
Oh, okay. No, ours would be the opposite. So all these people who had dates afterwards, if we ever go back to executing people, I would assume there might be like a few in a pretty short span of time because it's been a while.
It's nice to know that the state of Arkansas uses the same logic for scheduling their executions that I use for making eggs and omelets for my kids, which is they're going to go bad. We've got to use them.
Yeah. Well, I will say what bothers me about the stay that got issued stopping the executions is that these people have been sentenced to death by lethal injection in some cases for 20, 25 years. And they're just now getting around to objecting to the method of execution. It strikes me there's a timeliness issue that at some point it's okay. You've had, this has been the protocol for 25 years. Why, was your lawyer truly that incompetent not to object to the method of execution until a week before?
Well, yeah. Let me jump in because we're not talking about executing enemy combatants or terrorists who've killed people. We're talking about people who are domestic terrorists who have killed in the United States. So, listen, we could get wonky with this, but I'm just curious where everybody here falls personally on their feelings about the death penalty. And I'll go first. Every week when I introduce myself, I say I'm a moderate Democrat. And a lot of my friends say, well, that's ridiculous. You're as liberal as they come. Well, I am liberal on a lot of issues, but there are some issues that I am much more conservative than my party on. And the death penalty happens to be one of them. I am not for abolishing the death penalty. I understand all of the arguments for abolishing the death penalty, and frankly, I am one of those people that is evolving on it. I'm doing air quotes now, and someday I may get there. But I still think the death penalty has some place in our society, assuming we can remove the human error factor of false convictions. That's a big if, but I do believe in the abstract that society does have a right to put people to death. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm curious what you all think.
Well, I would say, just briefly, if it weren't for the fact that our federal courts, our federal civilian courts, were being used to try war on terror enemy combatants, I would be all for the elimination of the death penalty. Not only do I think that the innocent issue that you discussed is something of a concern, but I also don't like the fact that we essentially, in my opinion, short-circuit God's attempt to redeem people. I think anybody can be redeemed. Yes, call me naive, call it the one part of my old Catholic faith that I hang on to. But I do think that anybody can be redeemed, and I don't like the fact that we basically say, okay, you can't be redeemed and you're just going to be offed. I don't like us saying that as a government, saying that as a people. However, there are matters when it comes to enemy combatants. We should treat that entirely differently. We don't. We put them in the federal court system when we shouldn't. Those should be for military courts only and military justice, and handled very, very differently than how we do with civilian courts. That's the only reason why I want the death penalty maintained, because of that reality. If we could keep terrorists and enemy combatants out of the civilian court system, where they don't belong, in my opinion, then I'd be all for getting rid of the death penalty, because I don't think it is the moral thing to do.
Rebecca, where do you come down on this?
Well, can I ask DJ a question?
Yeah.
So you believe in the redemption of American civilians but not enemy combatants?
I believe that when it comes to enemy combatants, the United States of America has we have the right and the moral obligation to protect ourselves to kill the enemy. And I don't really think it is I don't make the battlefield and a military trial much of a distinction with a difference there. If they are an enemy of the United States, we should have the right to kill them in any way, shape, or form that we can. And I don't think they should be part of the civilian court system. I don't think they belong there. I think they belong in a military court system. They are not entitled. Enemies of the United States are not entitled to American constitutional rights and American jurisdictional rights. That only is for American citizens, including American citizens who've committed criminal acts. It doesn't apply to foreign citizens who have declared war against the United States.
So, DJ, as a serious question here, what would you say if one of these ISIS goofballs running a truck down the street kills a half dozen people, but instead of having to shoot the bastard and kill him, we disable him, we capture him in, I'll just say, New York City? So it's an entirely domestic thing.
If they have declared loyalty to ISIS, I put them in a military tribunal.
Even if they're an American citizen and the act was done in the United States of America?
If they have declared allegiance to ISIS, yes. It's the difference between General Robert E. Lee, who was a Confederate general, and Clement Vallandigham, who was a U.S. senator who criticized the war. Abraham Lincoln killed more Americans than any other American president in history in a just cause. He never put out a hit order on Clement Vallandigham. Clement Vallandigham was a dissident in the United States. General Robert E. Lee took up arms against the United States. That's the difference. General Grant chose not to execute Robert E. Lee, but that was a military decision.
How about Timothy McVeigh?
I'm not so sure about McVeigh. I'll admit that's a gray spot. That's a hard case under my circumstance. But I would probably say, as painful as it is, that under the structures that I've set up, Timothy McVeigh would not be executed. Unless we could show you his ties to a foreign power.
Okay, Rebecca?
I categorically oppose the death penalty.
And why?
Nobody has the right to take a life.
Okay.
I don't believe in war either. I understand the pragmatic reasons for war. I understand the utility of war. I do not believe in war.
Okay, let me ask you a very unfair hypothetical, but you'll understand where I'm coming from.
If Dukakis's wife were raped and murdered...
Oh, for God's sakes. No. Oh, hang on.
No.
Does killing that rapist bring his wife back? No. It doesn't. Okay? And that's frankly what he should have said. Because he didn't say that. What he said was the reason Michael Dukakis lost that debate was because he gave.
No, he said we need to bring them to a Holocaust
I remember.
center
I watched that.
Not
No,
use
it's okay.
poison gas. I'm sorry. I'm trying.
I know. I watched that debate.
I'm trying to make a
it's
Sean
okay.
Spicer
I watched
joke.
that debate
It's
because
failing.
I was a
I'm
teenage
flopping.
political geek, and I'm telling you, it was the answer he gave was so ridiculously technocratic that it was painful to watch. Had he looked and he said, "Look, killing that rapist doesn't bring my wife back. It doesn't make me mourn any less. It's not going to make me any less sad that my wife is gone." And then we have to ask ourselves, and then gone into whatever he would have gone on. It would have showed that at least had some empathy and some sympathy. And like, oh my God, why the hell are we asking him such a traumatic question? He lost the debate because he gave a technocratic and heartless answer, not because he opposes the death penalty.
Okay, let's get back onto the subject of the death penalty. So, Rebecca, self-defense. Self-defense. You believe in death to defend yourself and your family, right?
I don't know.
Really? If somebody was coming after one of your kids?
I would do everything in my power not to kill someone who was coming after my kids.
Okay. What did you think about the shooting to death of Osama bin Laden?
I would rather have taken him alive, frankly. I'd say I categorically oppose this because there is something in me, based on what I can't even tell you, that recoils at the idea of knowingly and deliberately taking a person's life. It is a gut-level reaction. It is not related to logic. And you can talk at me, you can offer me any hypothetical, and I just pull away from this idea of taking a life, and I can't explain it any better than I am right now.
That's fine. Molly, where do you fall on the spectrum?
I'm pretty much opposed. I am not. I don't think it's the state's place to take a life. For a variety of reasons, including, being sure, less concerned about it, when we know for sure that, there's compelling evidence that it is the person. But honestly, it's probably Catholicism. But really, I prefer, life in prison. Honestly, for the worst of the worst, I would actually prefer hard labor camps. I mean, really give it a choice between that and execution, especially since, you can undo hard labor camps. You can set people free with the Innocence Project or whatever versus, but what DJ was talking about does give me pause to think, because I do also believe in the just war doctrine. So kind of along with that, so enemy combatants would probably, fall under that. I don't really, it's hard for me to get too upset about, again, Timothy McVeigh, as somebody who has a lot of marathon runners in my family, the Boston marathon bombers, that they're awaiting execution, these kind of cases. But honestly, I do think that life in prison is a pretty harsh penalty, and it is my preference.
And Cliff?
Interesting enough, over time I have evolved in the opposite direction as DJ has been evolving in that there was a time when I was in high school when I was very much opposed to the death penalty. I am not terribly opposed anymore. Now, I agree with the point on, questions of innocence and so forth. I don't want to execute an innocent person, but when you've got a battlefield situation especially, or I'll just take the South Carolina church shooter, who I will not name on purpose, where there is no question of innocence whatsoever, the fact that there are going to be all these automatic appeals, actually, that sticks in my gut because, okay, you've admitted it, there's no question of innocence, and yet somebody can run around in circles on, this, that, and the other with the method and whatnot. Anyhow, long story short, I definitely believe that there is a case in military circumstances, if only because somebody who is violating the rules of war should not be able to avoid the consequences of doing so by simply throwing up their hands and saying, I give up, you can't shoot me. Because if you can't turn around and say, well, we're going to take you into court, we might have to execute you for that, at some point the soldier who's dealing with that's just going to say, pop, oops, my finger slipped. So I think there definitely is a place for it in war as to, and in cases of terrorism, when you get into cases of aggravated murder and the like, it gets more complicated, and that's what I consider to sort of be the edge case. But definitely in cases of war and terrorism, I think is at least it should be on the table.
Well, so a couple things. One, a big problem that also I have with the death penalty as applied are the automatic appeals. And it does get to the point where, it's 25 years later and there is something to this justice delayed is justice denied. And in many cases, people are somewhat redeemed and they're totally different people. And now here it is 25 years later, and it seems, cruel and unusual, honestly. Another thing was I happened to be down visiting my parents in Florida last month, and there was a pretty big news down in Orlando that the prosecutor was not going to pursue the death penalty as a personal decision against the man that was, seen on tape executing this African-American police officer woman outside of a Walmart. He had been on their radar. They were looking for him. He had also killed his pregnant girlfriend. And the police officers were up in arms, and ultimately the governor ended up pulling them off the case. And, cop killers, it's another difficult, and it leads to kind of like you said with, soldiers just taking care of it on the battlefield. There is, that reason too, that if it's pulled off, you will see, I think, a lot more of these police officers, killers.
So you think it's a deterrent on some level?
I do. I mean, or
I do
least,
too.
I
do too.
And I think, maybe I definitely think the police officers do. So that's where I have difficulty with it.
I think it also gives, the police officers and the soldiers and so forth it removes a disincentive for them to misbehave, if that makes sense. I'll be honest with you. If you have a guy who's killed a half dozen police officers and the police, shoot him under quote unquote questionable circumstances, there's a very good chance that the DA is going to say, "I refuse to bother pursuing a case against these officers. I don't care what it was. This is, I
you get all that
conviction that."
Right, because then you have all the incentive because he has to work with those police officers on subsequent cases.
Yeah. I will say that I think that Florida DA. I really wish Rick Scott had just turned around and said, "All right, I'm going to remove any case where the death penalty might come into consideration just immediately." I know he eventually moved to that. "I'm removing this from you, and I'm calling on the state legislature to impeach and remove. And since you were acting as an attorney for the state, I want a bar complaint filed. You have just refused to do your job as a lawyer."
Well, I'm not willing to go that far on that cliff. Now I don't know the context of it all, but if memory serves, those prosecutors in Florida are elected in their local counties or the local jurisdictions. If that prosecutor ran as an anti-death penalty candidate, and I don't know if he or she did, maybe they didn't.
She did.
But if they
she
ran,
did not.
Okay,
she did not.
Okay, if she did not, then
no. After she was elected, a ruling came down.
Say that again. After she was elected, what? You mean a ruling from a judge, or she decided herself?
Okay, after she was elected, a ruling came down from the state Supreme Court.
Okay.
A ruling came down from the state Supreme Court forcing them to adjust how they pursued death penalty cases, and her response was unilaterally, "Well, I'm going to use this as an excuse to not pursue the death penalty."
That's a different issue then.
There was also she's got a future campaign coming up, and she received a lot of money from George Soros.
But that in itself is not the issue. Had she run as an anti-death penalty candidate and been elected prosecutor, then I don't think there's any cause to go after her, because the constituents clearly would have recognized, okay, if we elect this person, they are not going to execute anyone in our county. That obviously is not what happened here.
Yeah,
so there is the concern of a lack of accountability. So, but that's all I'm going to say there.
I want to recommend just a quick book recommendation. I read this book a few years ago, and it stuck with me. It's called Autobiography of an Execution by an author named David R. Dow, and he is a death penalty lawyer in Texas. It is fascinating, and it exposes a lot of the flaws in the prosecutorial system and what the impact of that is on defendants. And he comes at it from a bias. The guy's a defense attorney, But taking a look at the way the facts play out in some of these cases and the circumstances is really interesting and actually very upsetting.
Yeah, well, I found the first episode of Serial to be very upsetting. I mean, that wasn't a death penalty case, but,
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I want to end up this week by trying something new. I'd like to go around and ask everybody, look, a lot happened in the news this week. Is there anything that's a pet peeve of yours, something that happens to just irk you personally that you've heard or seen, or a take on the news that you find really, for lack of a better word, irksome? Who wants to go first?
You go first, Kevin.
I get to go last. Okay, I'll go first. No, I'll go first. Police brutality has been in the news this week, and there have been, typical situations of innocent victims or people who should not have been shot, being shot, what have you. And I've noticed that a lot of people like to do this when they're debating it. If you take a position that's anti-police, eventually someone's going to come in who has 23 years on the force, and they're going to say, well, have you ever been a police officer? Do you know what it's like out there? Which to me is a really annoying way of debating, because that would preclude us from debating anything. I've never been president of the United States. I don't think that means that I can't opine on what a president should or shouldn't do. I've never been a school teacher, but I don't think that means I can't opine on what school teachers should or shouldn't do. So it really bothers me when people try to bully their way through an argument by taking their own particular insight based on their professional career into a debate and saying, I trump you because I've done it and you haven't.
I'm going to take the opposite end of that and say what bugs me is people who turn around and I'll just say talk out of their ass on something.
Well, that's our whole show, Cliff.
That's also
You're going to get us
annoying,
canceled.
But
why do you hang out with us, Cliff?
I mean, it's people who have no experience in an area, don't even really want to be educated in the area. If you don't know but you're curious about it and you want to learn more, awesome, good on you. There are times when I'm the guy who, somebody explains it to me. Oh, that's really cool. A good example of this is a couple of years ago, I gave a train ticket to a friend who was going to the Republican National Committee's meeting in Chicago. They were having trouble getting there, and so I gave him a ticket. Well, for reasons, the train had to be run from Pittsburgh instead of Washington. There were delays on the tracks. So all these people jumped and said, oh, how horrible Amtrak is. And I had to point out, guys, everybody who was on that train was kept in Washington, D.C. as long as possible, which is the nicest station on the route. They were given food vouchers. They were taken to Pittsburgh as quickly as possible, put on the train, and they were able to get to Chicago on time. Give me a break. And you had people who were still going, rah, rah, rah. And it's, well, I tried to explain it to you. And that's not uncommon in internet debates, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Good
that's
counter argument.
The definition of internet debates is people talking out their ass.
Yes, and that's how I spend my days. What about you, Rebecca? What's bugging you these days?
Ivanka Trump.
Why?
Because Ivanka Trump is sitting in the office next to the presidents with no policy experience, no education in policy, no apparent interest in policy for most of her career as a handbag magnate and assistant to a real estate developer. And I have worked in Washington. My husband has worked in Washington. We know between us probably a dozen highly qualified, intelligent, experienced, nuanced, pleasant, wonderful Republican women who could sit in Ivanka's chair and do 1,000 times better job, but Donald Trump doesn't have the imagination to hire outside his own family.
Okay. Molly?
So my news-inspired pet peeve is the news that my alma mater, Notre Dame, this week announced that they are going to have Mike Pence as their commencement speaker this spring. Traditionally, they have the president, the first year they did with President Obama. They did with, actually, when my brother-in-law graduated from there with George H.W. Bush. And the students are upset. They did manage to, with a campaign of 3,000 faculty and students signed, avoid getting Trump. So they invited Pence instead. Went down the line, and the students are against it. But they can't. What bothers me about this is not that they're upset about it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be upset when the Secret Service takes over your commencement. What bothers me about it is that they don't object to it because they don't like Pence or his politics, which actually it is. But what they're couching it in is that we don't feel safe. He makes us feel unsafe. And when, about to be college graduates feel unsafe by words delivered in a commencement speech, I get really, really aggrieved. And furthermore, they have this campaign where they're writing why they feel unsafe on whiteboards, which were recently...
What?
Yes, which were recently banned by Michigan State University because people would write, college students would write politically incorrect things on the whiteboards, so they banned the whiteboards. And I thought that was ridiculous. But now I am rethinking maybe these students can't handle having whiteboards. So,
do you remember when W spoke at Ohio State? Were you there?
Yes, I was there.
Yeah, that was my first year. And people were psyched about that. I don't remember the speech at all.
And President Obama also came and spoke around 2010. And
I have no memory of where presidents speak unless I'm attending the school.
If you want to complain about the politics, if you want to complain like, hey, when the president or the vice president comes and their Secret Service and it's no longer about the graduates, it's about security and lining up 2 hours ahead of time and you get a limited amount of tickets, I am all for those kind of complaints. But I don't feel safe. I just want to barf.
Molly, are you sure those whiteboards weren't banned because they were white?
Not at Notre Dame.
No. The whiteboards were banned at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, Sparty can't stand up to a whiteboard?
No, they cannot be trusted with the whiteboard. And as one student who actually had been harassed on her whiteboard said, they're just going to use chalk.
I know, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
Students, they were very ingenuitive.
I want to jump in. I know that we were going to keep this quick, but I want to jump in and build on that story. I went to college in the mid 1970s. Yes, I'm that old. And when we were getting ready for my graduation, my commencement, the school had a chance to get Richard M. Nixon. This was after he had resigned from the presidency, just after the Nixon-Frost interviews, but it would have been his first public speech after resigning the presidency. And he had agreed to do it. They had booked him. There was an uproar on the campus. The liberals on the campus put up a big stink. We don't want Richard Nixon. We don't want to give him a forum for his lies and blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, they put enough pressure on the administration that they pulled the invitation. And do you know who ended up speaking instead of Richard Nixon at my commencement speech?
George McGovern?
No. Harold Gould, the actor who played Rhoda's dad. Now, Harold Gould was a graduate of Albany State College, or Albany Teachers College, back when he went there. And it was nice to have a graduate who had made it good in the acting world. But Harold Gould was not Richard Nixon.
I have to ask, and forgive me for this. Any relation to Elliot Gould? Okay.
No.
I just thought I'd ask.
Okay, you're not going to tell me though that in the 1970s they complained that Richard Nixon is coming and they don't feel safe.
No, we did not. I'm not a big fan of the safe space thing either. Okay, so that was a good one, Molly. We've gone long on this one. DJ, you're up.
Yeah, just quickly. I know that there are a lot of people who don't trust Donald Trump in the White House. They don't trust him to do the right thing. Frankly, I'm one of those people. But the notion that because Donald Trump is such a fool, that therefore when Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, the leader of a bloodthirsty regime that terrorizes its own people, goes after dissidents, and has been responsible for propping up numerous terrorist states and terrorist groups around the world. The idea that anything Xi Jinping says should be taken as gospel because it showed us how much of a fool Donald Trump was really, really gets to me. You don't have to believe Donald Trump is a fool, and I do, to therefore agree with everything Xi Jinping says. Just because Donald Trump is an idiot doesn't make Xi Jinping honest. He is a liar, he is a fraud, and I guarantee you there was not a single thing in his 10-minute lecture to Donald Trump that was factual, accurate, or true. It was all a bunch of lies, and if you want to be upset at Donald Trump, Don't be upset that he was so ignorant that he needed Xi Jinping to tell him about North Korean history. Be upset with him that he was so ignorant that he actually believed all the bullshit that Xi Jinping was slinging at him.
Well, Xi Jinping probably started out by saying, "Hey, this is great cake."
Yeah. the most beautiful soba noodles you've ever seen. I don't think he's ever said that to his people. Okay, so thanks for listening, everybody. Please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Facebook at Facebook.com/More Perfect Union Podcast, and share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. And if you would like to join our political debate between shows, join our Facebook group, Open Fire Politics. We're all there, and we'd love to see you there too. Anybody have a final thought?
No, I don't think. The Obama administration was post-racial. We're post-thoughtful. That's the Trump administration, post-thought.